And hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity. I am Sean Martin, your host, and I know if you follow the show, you hear me say it all the time. I get to talk to really cool people about really cool things, and I'm always looking at how we can better operationalize our technology and our cybersecurity programs for the benefit of the business, not just to reduce risk, but to help them grow and achieve new things. Perhaps even innovate and offer new services to their customers and partners. Not always easy to do. Of course, the person at the helm of those programs typically is the Chief Information Security Officer. And I think there's been a shift in the role, of course, the weight on the shoulders of the person in that seat, and perhaps even the number of seats available and the number of people trying to get a seat in that role. And it's an interesting time, I'll say this. And I'm thrilled to have my guest on, Phil Beyer. Thanks for joining me, Phil.
It was my pleasure, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always good to see you, my friend. And I've been, I know it sounds nerdy, but I've been dreaming about this topic since you and I met a few weeks back and discussed it in a little bit of detail. And I think it's been an interesting conversation. The whole point for me is kind of the state of the CISO job market. Yeah. What that looks like from an employer perspective and a candidate perspective.
Right.
But for me, it's also, I think there are some tells in the interviews from a question and presentation perspective that might paint a different picture of the state of the cybersecurity program compared to what those in the role might think is real based on what they present to their peers and the board compared to how they discuss the program with a candidate. So that's my perception. I'm excited to dig in to see where things go with this. Phil, for those who have not met you yet, maybe a few words about some of the things you've been up to. I know you well. We're good friends and engage in a number of different things, but I want my audience to know how amazing you are.
Right. So, I don't know about the amazing part, but certainly the friend part. Absolutely. Hi, folks. My name is Phil Beyer. Until about this time last year, I was head of security at Etsy. That was my most recent role. So led a wonderful team, amazing, very talented team, very engineering driven and in a very dynamic part, right? The growth of Etsy through the pandemic was incredible. It was a great ride to be a part of. Wonderful organization. Can't say enough good things about Etsy overall. Before that, I was in a variety of security leadership roles. I was a consultant in the first part of my career. So LinkedIn has all the gory details if you want them, but ultimately that's my kind of path and a lot of the lens through which I view things. Very technical background, comfortable in a lot of different domains and in areas, and very interested in practical things, stuff that works, right? The kinds of information security practices that actually get something done, as opposed to the stuff that looks great on paper or checks a box or something like that. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the many things that I like about you, Phil, is you're very thoughtful in how you approach things and how you present things and how you have conversations with others. I mean, you do a lot for the community at large, and I'm just thankful for having the opportunity to know you and chat with you. So let's get into you. You've been looking at CISO roles, security leadership roles over the last few weeks, months, whatever.
Yeah, specifically over the last 12 months, but certainly also for years, because in searching for, this would be back in 2019 and beginning a search that ultimately culminated in taking the role at Etsy, which was, for all intents and purposes, I definitely was not the quote unquote CISO, but I was the leader of the security program. I was the senior most information security leader at Etsy. I reported to the board on a quarterly basis. A lot of the things that folks would tick off in terms of their checklist of what constitutes a CISO role. So having been in seat there and having had other responsibilities that are very CISO-like, this has been on my mind for many years. And the job search process was already complex and difficult and challenging and emotionally trying, and it's not any easier in the current market. Before we get into that, though, Sean, I want to say a couple of things that I think are very relevant for this conversation that bear repeating, because what we're about to talk about is far from well understood. Any kind of job search is not like systematically as a process. I realize there are a whole bunch of people and a kabillion books and even more podcasts that and hosts and other things that talk about being experts in job search. And that's certainly not me. And I don't think any of those folks are necessarily expert searchers either. It's very much a non-scientific process, or unscientific or something, in the sense that we can't control it, we can't measure it, we can't test it. Like we can't approach it with a scientific method. So it's very easy to, the first thing here is caveat emptor, right? The buyer beware. The disclaimer is anything that we're about to talk about. It's not like I have clear conclusions and a bunch of guidance to give people, oh, do this X, Y, and Z, and everything's going to be okay. Because that's certainly not the case, even in a perfect job market, or even in a very, well-established and a stable CISO job market, which is the opposite of what we're in right now.
Yep. And I'll just make a comment there, because I don't think the goal here is to give advice for seekers. I think your experience paints a picture that I don't think many might think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that so since we've kind of inserted that disclaimer caveat, then I feel comfortable talking. But a lot of times when folks, including myself, if I'm not careful about it, when we talk about these things, we can almost lead the listener, or lead the audience, or lead the group of people we're talking to come to some sort of conclusion. And while I might and do intend to share things that I think are relevant and important and useful for folks, I don't think that they're gospel, or I don't think that they're clear. Especially in your own experience. So,
well, you're in the right place, because the whole point of Marco and I's vision for ITSP Magazine, and my show in particular as well, is to get people to think.
Exactly.
There's no one right answer, and sometimes there isn't even an answer. Sometimes there's many.
Good.
And I guess to tie back to yes, there are a lot of numbers and data that people and organizations can pull to say this is how things look from a market perspective in a role, whatever. There is science behind that, but ultimately it's a person talking to a person who's hiring for a job that they're going to do, that, by the way, has a culture.
Exactly. Yeah,
that is not scientific. And so to put any plan in place based on pure numbers and data is going to be problematic, in my opinion. So all about getting people to think. So let's
good.
Where do you want to start, Phil?
Yeah, here's the thing that I'll say that will kind of color the conversation. I think this is the first employer's market for CISOs. So if we talk about like a real estate market, right? You go out and say it's a buyer's market. Well, then, which is not what the case of buying houses right now. It's not a buyer's market. It's a seller's market, right? So that kind of economic model we tend to understand. This is the first time in my observation.
It's a lender's market.
Yeah, okay, good point. Good point. The folks who are making money are clearly the folks who are going to benefit from the high interest rates.
Yes.
This is the first time for CISOs, not necessarily for cybersecurity, all cybersecurity professionals, but I would say definitely for CISOs. This is the first time that it's been an employer's market, because right now the demand is lower than it's been in many, many years, if not ever, but definitely lower than relatively than it's been in the past few years. And the supply is very high. So the supply of people on the market is higher. And this is even with your, you did interview, so I've complimented you before, and I'll compliment you here on air, that the CISO Circuit series that you do with Michael Piacenti of Hitch Partners is amazing. And for the folks listening, you probably have already listened to that series, but if you haven't, stop right now and go listen to the first 3 there in that series, because the guidance that Michael is giving, that's much more statistics based or data based in sense of his sample size is much higher. But I can just regurgitate here based on his information that the number of people, the number of available CISOs in the market is a ton higher based on his experience than it really ever has been. And that kind of putting together those things, that yields in a very simple economic understanding it's an employer's market. So that supply versus demand dynamic really is at play here. It has implications for us, but that's really what's driving a lot of this aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think I've also seen or heard of CISO roles being cut and people in leadership underneath them given the responsibility, but not the title necessarily, and they're not replacing the role with somebody else. So I think we see more people entering the market as CISOs and not as many positions as well. Yeah. And then there's a lot of factors there too that we talked before we started about the weight on the shoulder of the person in that seat, the responsibility, the liability, growing as well, and
clearly that's not, and we're not going to solve that problem here. And you've talked to folks who are working towards not necessarily solving the problem, but addressing it. All these liability issues, certainly, they're not going away anytime soon, and whether that ends up affecting the person in the seat or the people looking for the seats or what have you, I think it's a relevant part of the conversation. It's just not necessarily something that's going to make or break the search, right? Because the search, you're either in the market for a CISO role, literally like me, you're on the market, or you're in seat somewhere and you're looking for a CISO role next, or you're aspiring to be looking for a CISO role at some point in the very near future. All of those, in all of those cases, ultimately, in speaking from my own personal experience here, ultimately the liability issues just complicate the matter. They don't really make or break the decision. The liability issues mean, well, maybe I'm going to ask for more. If I get to the offer stage, maybe I'm going to ask for more, not necessarily compensation, but some more protections like people have talked about, and we can point folks in the right direction there. But, am I going to look for the kinds of things in a program that I'm comfortable with, or that I'm comfortable, problems I'm comfortable solving, versus things that I'm uncomfortable working with. I think there are modifiers here, but ultimately it's probably not going to drive folks away from aspiring to be a CISO.
Yeah, so it's a complex. I've not done it, so I'm only guessing here, but I'm assuming that the conversations are difficult to navigate. Let's put it that way. And I want your perspective on it, because I have a hunch that the hiring manager is either not completely informed of the state of the cybersecurity program, or is and may hold things back, or is and isn't holding things back and sharing something that is a tell for the candidate that says, this may not be the environment that I want to be in, just in general, but also because of and so when it's an employer's market and the candidate has fewer options, I'm assuming you don't want to cut things off the table too soon, too quickly,
right?
But you also don't want to put yourself in a position where you're in a role that the culture sucks, the manager is not great, the program is in shambles, there's no budget, that the company doesn't believe in it, it's purely for compliance purpose, whatever, pick your favorite thing there. So what are some of those conversations sounding like where you're trying to earn your spot there while also understanding what that spot really means? Are you going to go home happy or crying every night?
It's a delicate balance. I think you're striking, or you're describing the balance accurately. There are a few things that I have used as guiding principles, if you will, that help me discern, is this the right thing to go after? versus something else. And a few of them are very they limit the funnel, if you will, right? So in kind of a sales funnel concept, like I have opportunities and I have things that I'm pursuing in terms of interviews or active opportunities versus getting to final round or offer or something like that. And at the top of that funnel, like what comes in, I just don't let stuff in that many other people do, Sean. So now, massive caveat from before, my experience, but then also now in an employer's market, like that the dynamic changes because as you were just pointing out, well, okay, Phil, you don't go after these kinds of roles and you do go after these other kinds of roles, but you're not in a role right now. So does that change the things? And the honest answer is absolutely it does. It absolutely changes what I would normally go after versus what I would normally avoid.
Do you mind sharing some of that? Because months ago we met again. I think there was we're in the city we met, but it was along the Hudson River there somewhere. We were describing kind of the ideal organization, what sector they're in, and so I don't know if you can describe what it was, why it was, and then maybe how things have shifted since, if they have at all.
Yeah. There's definitely, there's clear guidance from folks around doing a job search that it tends to go better generally for people. It tends to go better when you have an idea of the outcome you're looking for. Not necessarily the job title, not necessarily the compensation, but even the target company, right? Target market, target size team. If you're a people leader, target kind of role. A lot of times that comes down to job title, but I would even say, especially in the CISO job market, there's all kinds of CISOs for all kinds of companies. And a CISO who is compliance focused or who has a risk management background versus a CISO who has a software engineering background versus a CISO who has a penetration testing background. Those are very different archetypes, those three. And there's certainly more archetypes than that. So understanding the kind of archetype or stereotype or what kind of CISO you are, right? That helps your search. And then each of those archetypes is appropriate for really a subset of companies or opportunities out there. There are situations where a company has had one, and I've talked to folks like this. There are situations where a company has had one kind of CISO, and now they're looking for a different kind of CISO. But even then, many of those folks will really think, like they just have an impression of what they're looking for. They don't really have that much of an idea. You spoke to this already, but the hiring manager is very often, like, I don't know, 90+%, maybe even more, doesn't have a security background. So unless they're working with, and again, call out to the kinds of recruiting firms that you're friends with and that both of us know, unless they're working with a very experienced recruiting firm, specifically in security CISO searches, they don't know what they're looking for, which makes it even worse in this employer's market. I mean, one of the key things that jumps out that everybody either complains about or mentions or talks about, but is even worse in an employer's market of any kind, is ambiguity of job descriptions. So I was
going to say, because you use the archetype, right? So that's the character. Yeah. What story are you going to put that character in? And if you can't get a picture of the story, you don't know it.
And historically in cybersecurity, exactly. We've complained about ambiguous job descriptions all over the place for forever. Even a lot of times about our own companies or our own inability to really craft a very accurate job description for a role we're about to post. But it's even worse when a company knows that they're going to be able to talk to all sorts of talent and get a great deal on them because it's an employer's market. So, like in that situation, the job description is not helpful. The vertical market of the company sometimes is helpful, and if you can't work with a retained search recruiting firm, who are already kind of pre-qualifying, that's really why the reason why you want to work with what's called a retained recruiting search firm or retained executive recruiter is because they're paid in advance and they essentially pre-qualify the lead. This is different than most of the other kind of firms, or recruiters, which are called contingency. So if that's interesting to you, there's books about it and resources there. But that distinction tends to be my first criteria. Is the opportunity coming from a retained search firm? All right, I will talk to you. Is the opportunity coming from not coming from a retained search firm? I won't pick up the phone. It's really that simple, at least historically. That's not the case anymore for the reasons that we've just been talking about, but for me at least. But a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, up until this latest situation, my first decision making and only decision making criteria was: is a retained search firm involved? If so, I'll talk. If not, I'm not interested. Because all that pre-qualification and all the difficulty that we're encountering and that you're speaking to, Sean, about, well, what can I learn? What can I discern about the program through the interviewing process? What can I see through kind of classic open source intelligence, kind of searching through what I see online about the company? What can I hear from peers as I talk to them through the interviewing process? All of that is so much more complex when it hasn't been, when the lead hasn't been pre-qualified.
So let's talk about the engagement. So something bypasses all the filters.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, on both sides, right? Because there's plenty of filters on the hiring side. I don't know, maybe a chat with somebody in the hiring role would be interesting as well. But I know in general, gazillions of candidates, a lot of filtering on the employer side. And then now from your perspective, a lot of filters. So it's a rare moment that the two align on paper, we'll say, right? And then comes the human element. And so what are those conversations like? And I'm looking at it from a couple of different things. So how are you presenting? How are you sharing your archetype that you want to be to them? And how are you, if it wasn't, hopefully enough was clear to say, I'll take an interview, to know what the setting is, what the story is going to be. How do you find that those align? What do those conversations sound like? I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah. I would say that right off the bat, if you're clear about, if you differentiate yourself, if one is clear about who you are and that kind of archetype, whether you use the word archetype, I don't know that I would necessarily use that for folks other than with a recruiter or something who probably understands that right off the bat and is even telling you, oh, based on what I'm hearing from you, Phil, this is the kind of CISO that you are. Oh yeah, okay, I agree with you, Mr. or Mrs. Recruiter. After getting past that kind of screen, the first opportunity I would think, and in my experience, to discern whether this is going to work, you're probably most often to a hiring manager after the recruiter. That's usually the process. Usually, if you make it through the recruiter, the door with the recruiter and the recruiter screen, you're most often talking to a hiring manager as that first conversation before you go into a longer, larger interview process with peers or with other stakeholders. And that conversation ends up being critical for the reasons you're speaking to. And that is this even going to work, right? Based on the way that I work, or the way that I think, or the way that I like to build a security program, or if I'm an aspiring CISO from years ago, that version of me, is this the way that I want to build a security program? Based on the questions that the hiring manager is asking, the things that they're interested in learning from you, and what they're willing to tell you about the person in the role previously, which is usually a fairly standard question early on if you haven't learned that tends to paint that very rough kind of impressionist style picture of what's going on behind the scenes. And if you figure out right away, and certainly I had this experience more than once, if you figure out right away that this person that is ostensibly hiring for this role, their attitude or their approach is very different than mine, not better or worse, just different. And that's a clear sign right away that either they're going to dismiss me or decline me as a candidate, and then we'll both move on with our lives. Or if they do advance me, I gotta understand from everybody else whether the impression I got of a hiring manager in that first conversation is accurate. And that's not too difficult to discern as you go through as we ask, well, what is your impression of this person, or how do you like working for Jill, or something like that, that kind of that stuff, because we haven't said it yet, but it's worth underscoring here that being a CISO is all about relationships and influence. It's very rarely about knowledge, technical knowledge, or, can you give the right answer when you're in front of somebody, like doing the calculus problem. It's not really about that like algorithmic technical knowledge. I realize that there are some exceptions. Certainly there are some CISOs, or there are some roles where the intimate technical knowledge of an architecture or a particular market or something like that might really, like engineering prowess, might really make or break the role. I suppose that's possible, but I haven't ever been in that situation. And many of the people I've talked to, that's not the way that they describe it. So I accept that there are exceptions to the rule, but generally the rule is relational. The rule is that the role is relational. And if you can effectively build relationships with your hiring manager, the first key stakeholder that any role has, and then the other key stakeholders, that's what you have to discern right away in the interviewing process. Is this going to be even feasible or possible based on personality and archetype and all the things we've been talking about so far? Everything else, I do think, especially in this situation now, everything else is really a solvable problem. So there may very well be like bodies buried in the company. They're very hopefully not literal, right? Figurative bodies, but
where the river is.
there may be massive holes to plug in the dam, right? With more fingers than I have to plug up the dam. But the way that I tend to see those things, the like, oh, there are problems here, and should I be worried about that? My view, Sean, is job security, man. I've got work to do. Like that's I'm not worried about that. Right? Yeah, I'm not afraid of that. Right?
Looking for the cush. Yeah. The cush. Yeah. I have full support. The budget's there. Team's built. The former person in the seat just retired.
Yep.
So do you have the hard job?
Not so secret, right? So like this is just between you and I, right, Sean? This is I'm about to give you the secret here. So this is just between you and I. Yeah, I'll whisper it. Okay. Yeah. No, but that's not the case for anybody. Right? No one is in that situation. Nobody's in that seat. I know you. Yeah. Sean, I clearly we're friends. I know you know that. And probably every listener knows that too. But just in case you need to hear it one more time, there is no role like that. It's never the case. No one has enough money. No one has a big enough team. No one has unlimited resources. And even if you had it for an instant or a blink of an eye, your next boss or the next CFO or the new CEO or whatever is going to pull that rug right out from under you. So there is no situation that is good. I do think that it's worth looking for something that would be like an untenable situation. That's like there certainly have been those. We all through the community, because everybody talks, right? We've all heard about things like that. We've all heard about folks who are set up for failure or who are just teed up to be the scapegoat or what have you. Like definitely that exists.
Well, let's talk about maybe not the specifics there, but just kind of the realities of. So it is a hard job. There's a lot of responsibility. Nothing ever aligns completely on all cylinders. Not all cylinders are firing at the right times. So for me, that comes back to points you made earlier, where it's about the people,
right?
That you're interacting with, and I used the word culture earlier. How do you? Because are they honest that the program sucks? We're having trouble. We selected a platform that's given us fits, or we're due for an audit, and we know we're going to fail, and we don't know how to get from here to there. Whatever the story is, how do you know if they're being honest in their presentation of what's really going on?
If there are no, so pretty simple litmus test for me, Sean. If I ask, if I dig a little bit or ask a little bit for flaws and I don't get any, then I can't believe anything that they've just said, right? So basically, when I've gone beyond the surface and had hey, let's talk real here. Like, what are the problems? If that list isn't, if there isn't a list, then they're probably withholding, they're probably missing something, or it's somebody, either a stakeholder or a hiring manager who hasn't been involved. Both of which are, again, I don't know that there's any red flags or fewer red flags these days for people, but that's certainly a yellow or an orange or something that is to be worried about, in the sense that if you're interviewing with somebody, theoretically, or they're supposed to be someone who is well connected to the security program. You're not going to interview with the janitor. You're not going to interview, even most times you're not interviewing with the CEO, because for the most part, the CEO is not intimately involved with the security program in most companies. So the person you're interviewing with, either hiring manager or a key stakeholder, has some vested interest in the security program's success. That's why they've been involved, right? So a key aspect of that conversation needs to be, can I build a rapport in the 45 minutes, or hopefully not 30, because that's hard, but 45 minutes to an hour or so? Can I build enough rapport to actually ask a question like, well, tell me what you're expecting from the person in this role, or in the first 90 days, or tell me about how you've been working with the security team over the past few years, or tell me about not a flaw or something like that. Like, that's a little bit too little too pushy, but basically, again, asking a little bit for, well, what's behind the curtains? Pull the curtain back for me and show me a little bit of what is there. If that doesn't happen, then it's either difficult for you to build a rapport with this person, or they're hiding something. Because almost always, people are hiring this role, especially now, because they need the role, not because they just have to have the role. Yeah. At least for the kinds of things that we're talking about.
Yeah. So I want to turn the wheel slightly now and take the off ramp to maybe the entrance on the freeway, depending on how you look at it, to the state of programs based on your exchanges with organizations. So where you've had conversations, where you believe truth was spoken, where you got some of the insights are with respect to, we're here, we need to get to here. We want this outcome. We're not there yet. These are the challenges we face. These are the areas we need help with.
Yeah.
What's the state of cybersecurity? Where are the biggest areas where organizations are struggling? Is it in AppSec? Is it in cloud security? Is identity a thing? What are some of the things that you uncovered?
Yeah. I'll admit my bias right away, in the sense that, because my, again, archetype or type of CISO or whatever, because I'm a more technical and or engineering driven style CISO, those are the kinds of opportunities that people reach out to me for. So I'll try to eliminate that bias as best I can, but I'll admit it in advance here that's oftentimes the kinds of conversations I'm having. When I'm talking to folks, it's usually because they've either had a CISO, or they thought they needed in the past a CISO that was more kind of compliance driven, or even risk driven. I realize we all should kind of focus on risk, so bear with me in the sense that there are definitely folks who grow up through compliance or legal or risk management, who have a different lens with information security than those who grew up through operations or IT or engineering. And in that latter case, when a CISO is brought in, or when they promote someone to CISO who really came to things with that compliance focus, even with the understanding that they want to be a very technical person, but when their focus is on compliance, when their focus is on risk management, then what ends up happening is the program doesn't achieve things that hiring manager or those leaders are expecting. Because so we should have to go on a brief kind of bunny trail here, that we often talk about security as being a very difficult job, purely based on the following: that when we do a great job, nothing happens, right? When security does really well at what we've set out to do, ideally nothing happens. It's a quiet day. And there's very few other roles in an organization, in the classic enterprise, that are like that. I suppose legal is kind of like that, and maybe there are a few others, but for the most part, that's not the case for operations. That's not the case for IT. That's not the case for engineering. It's not product. You can go down the list. Sales, with like everybody. They're going for some sort of metric. They're going for some sort of, they're releasing some sort of a new thing, right? A new shiny thing for the customer. They're delivering some value in some way, shape, or form. The value we're delivering is intangible, very intangible. yeah, massively so. And as much as this is the kind of the blunt truth that many of us need to hear, including me at different times throughout my career, the blunt truth is, as much as people like the idea of not having anything bad happen, they won't really pay for it. If people have had bad things happen in their lives, then they go buy insurance. Most of us don't, because of loss aversion and other kinds of cognitive biases, and mostly like availability heuristic stuff. If we've seen a wreck, or if we've been in a wreck, then we buy auto insurance, besides the fact that it's legally required. Similarly, we don't buy flood insurance unless I'm forced to in my house, or I've been flooded in the past. You get what I'm saying, right? Like we don't think of this risk until something actually happens. So for those organizations where something bad has happened, then they look to the CISO to, hey, make sure that nothing bad happens anymore. But that only lasts for a little while, just like all these other classic scientific studies of this particular cognitive bias. At some point, that runs out. At some point, not just keep the lights on, but keep everything quiet. That only lasts for so long. They only want to pay for it for so long. And so
a lot of the job openings then event driven. They had to pay a ransom, or they lost data and had to report, or
that's part of what I was getting to, that there are job openings because folks are not seeing progress in the security program that they would have anticipated or expected, because they to think of it this way, they're buying like a risk reduction, they're buying an insurance policy in the form of a CISO, but they also expect, Sean, to get something out of it. So like they're buying a policy for their car, but they expect that the car is going to get improved in a certain way, or like you get a new paint job, or get new wheels or get a replacement engine or something like that. I'm mixing my analogies, but the point being that they're expecting one thing and they're getting something entirely different. Really, what they're just getting is a very stable, dependable car driving down the road. They're not getting improvements. It's not flashy. It's not a sports car. It's not looking pretty and cool. It's not a differentiator. It's none of the things that they're expecting to get. What CISOs are often delivering is very dependable, very stable, and very, well, reduced risk. And when that happens, that's when the dissatisfaction starts to happen. It starts to be introduced at the stakeholder level of, yeah, but really this person or this program is not delivering for us. So let's either make it difficult for that person and burn them out, and they'll move, or let's encourage them to move on, and let's bring somebody else in. And that's where I started. That I'm being brought in, or I'm oftentimes being talked to when somebody wants to bring in an engineering driven leader because they're looking for a security team that works better. I don't know that I've encountered any security teams that really don't work at all with someone else. They just work poorly with another group, right? And so improving that relationship of how security works with engineering or how security works with product or something, they want to improve that, or they actually want the security team to deliver on some sort of outcomes that haven't happened yet. And that distinction or that maturity of our role is going to continue to be a push and pull challenge, because again, this liability stuff doesn't make it any easier. But the fact that oftentimes our incentive is for nothing bad to happen, but everybody else in the organization is incentivized to make something happen, right? We're being told nothing should happen, and everybody else is incentivized to make stuff happen. That's when we just don't look like anybody else, and not looking like anybody else in this case is a bad thing.
So talk to me as we wrap here about the maturity of the business. You used the word outcome before. In terms of what you're looking for in the role, in your experience, is the business more mature in defining and articulating what the outcome is from the program that they want to achieve?
Bluntly, no. I don't think anything has changed really in the last few years. It's better than it's been a decade ago, but I still think we have so much farther to go.
What are they saying that's misaligned, do you think?
Largely it's incentive based. Largely the incentive is either nothing bad should happen, or like make us better compared to our peers or something like that. So like that's still generally what security programs come down to. There are certainly exceptions, but the vast majority of expectations of a CISO ends up being do incrementally better, a little bit better of these things that we've talked about already. And that means that there really is very little understanding about the role overall, or about how an information security program could become beneficial for any given enterprise. Because I do think there's absolutely opportunity. I don't think we're really stuck as much as we haven't worked through the stage of immaturity when folks don't really know what they should be expecting from information security. It's similar to CIOs before and probably before them, COOs or others.
Yeah, because I'd love to hear an executive say, we have to be compliant, but we're spending too much money on achieving compliance. Or we need cyber insurance, but we're not unable to put in place policies and controls and articulate the program in that regard in order to get the best we've with the best premiums.
True.
So those are kind of like business things. Like we're spending too much money, we're not able to get the benefit of something in the market because we
right. I think there's some very near term possibilities that are reasonable, and that is that at some point our executive leadership should say similar things to what we try to tell ourselves in our CISO echo chamber or cybersecurity echo chambers, and that is we exist like brakes on a car, right? If we want the car to go speed down the highway, it has to have brakes. It can't go faster safely. It can't go faster without a good set of brakes. And we want to be that really good set of brakes so that when AI happens or when Gen AI happens, we can adopt it faster because our security team is adaptable, flexible, and can really help us accept that risk or enter into that risk in a smart way. Or our CISO team or our security program is a strong in some particular aspect of what we do as a business, and so we're able to advance faster and make more money faster in some particular area, or pivot quicker. Like that's really what we should be hearing from our executives. And this is not news. This is what we're telling ourselves when we are trying to articulate our value but that's still not something that's articulate that's spoken back to us. When we finally start, when we finally start hearing that from CEOs collectively, not one individual, but collectively from CEOs, from CFOs, from chief legal officers or COOs, that's when we know, okay, we've reached that next level of maturity. When they're starting to speak back to us, my security program is intended to help me adopt technology in a safe way so that we can leverage technology faster to beat our competitors.
I'm just thinking, who is that? If we can't say it ourselves, we can't get them to say it, and they're not inclined to say it. To me, it sounds like some business architect or something.
Well, I do think
I'm just thinking of the car analogy. It's like somebody decided the better brakes we put on, the faster we can go. Right. Because we can stop faster, or the way we design the car, it can go faster, but also handle the stoppage better.
So there certainly are some CTOs that talk this way, some CIOs that talk this way, some even probably COOs or presidents of organizations. Like there are a few, and I think to describe the progress here that's relatively slow compared to what I want it to be, but probably not that slow compared to other professions, is when more of these examples of successful leaders or companies, when they win, then their peers look around and say, I wonder why, Sean, I wonder why they won and we didn't. How did we get beaten out by them? Because I thought we had a superior product, or I thought we really understood the market better than they did. And when somebody wins because of some sort of security differentiator or something like that, that's when it's really gonna take hold. And it doesn't have to be some massive crazy thing. It could be a bunch of minute or a bunch of incremental wins around that start to, so like the image that I have in my book, or the image that I have in my head, is of Jim Collins writing Good to Great so many years ago. And I realized that there are aspects of that research or that study and that work that has been questioned over the years, rightly so. But ultimately, part of what either flywheel or other kinds of concepts that Collins introduced there, they've been latched onto by leaders because of folks succeeding over time with those concepts. And that it's the same thing here, that our profession gets better or gets more mature when we share. And this is like, I haven't actually said this yet, which is surprising to me. It's been more than 45 minutes, and I haven't talked about like sharing and collaborating and being together about this. Like when we as leaders work together to advance practices that are successful and tell each other how to do it, like help each other and do this together, that's when we see that success spread, and it becomes more, we increase the awareness of those executive stakeholders. Like folks learn more about what works by seeing it happen in organizations and seeing leaders implement it. So like we're really all incentivized. It would be better for us to share common successful practices, not just the kinds of defensive style things like this countermeasure works or this product works, more like this program style or this program objective works. This approach to influencing stakeholders works. This approach to communicating value or communicating decisions to executive stakeholders works. That kind of a thing, that really benefits us in the long run as a collective group, because each of those executive teams or boards and others, they eventually see it all, it bubbles up, and they say, aha, this is the time it worked, and these other times it didn't. So let's just do more of the stuff that works. Does that make sense?
No, I love it. No, I know. And I think you're onto something there. There's no question the community, but it's really those deep conversations that
this is hard stuff. I hope I'm not giving any impression, because I certainly think to myself, this is very challenging and difficult things. And I'm glad to have friends and colleagues and others I can lean on to say, hey, this is what I've tried in this situation. to share both, like, this is what's worked for me, but then also what has worked for you. How have you approached this thing, or how have you done this? Because, like, yeah, the job is already hard enough. I don't need to make it harder by just relying on my own intelligence and my own experience, because then it's just going to fail even more spectacularly. So
it's even more fun if you can find something you can apply and see the outcome faster or better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's satisfaction in that too. Yeah. Well, Phil, it's been great to catch up with you, and appreciate you sharing your insights over the last few months. And yeah, I know you're going to continue to do great things for the community and in your role, however, whenever, wherever you land, and whoever that is, whatever organization that is, they're going to be in a better position by having you on their team. I know that for sure.
Thank you.
And any final thoughts before we wrap?
It's been an honor. It's great to be on here. It's great to be able to share these thoughts with folks. And if any of this is provocative in a good or a bad way, I welcome a conversation. By all means, reach out and let's talk about it, because I do think like I was saying, it gets better through refinement, right? We all improve, myself as well as everyone else. We improve when we refine these ideas together. So let's keep it going. And if this is something that's interesting, let's talk more.
Most definitely. Well, Phil, thank you so much. And for everybody listening and watching, please do subscribe and share and comment. Connect with Phil and share your thoughts with him. Post on social media what you think about this. What did I say that was lame? I know I said something that was lame. So let me know and have a good old chat with Phil while you're at it as well. So thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.